英語聞き流し10分間、名作リスニング、英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語は、ホームページよりご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com
At daybreak on the following morning he set out for Cordova, ardent and smiling, filled with presentiments of happiness. But there is no cheerfulness that rules for long in the face of certain sinister aspects of nature. The weather was close and dull, the train, which was nearly empty, ran through an immense plain, destitute of every sign of habitation. He found himself alone in a very long car, which resembled those on trains for the wounded. He gazed to the right, he gazed to the left, and he saw nothing but an endless solitude, strewn with tiny, deformed trees, with contorted trunks and branches, in attitudes such as were never seen before, almost of wrath and anguish, and a sparse and melancholy vegetation, which gave to the plain the aspect of a ruined cemetery. He dozed for half an hour, then resumed his survey. The spectacle was still the same. The railway stations were deserted, like the dwellings of hermits, and when the train stopped, not a sound was heard. It seemed to him that he was alone in a lost train, abandoned in the middle of a desert. It seemed to him as though each station must be the last, and that he should then enter the mysterious regions of the savages. An icy breeze nipped his face. On embarking at Genoa, towards the end of April, it had not occurred to him that he should find winter in America, and he was dressed for summer. After several hours of this he began to suffer from cold, and in connection with the cold, from the fatigue of the days he had recently passed through, filled as they had been with violent emotions, and from sleepless and harassing nights. He fell asleep, slept a long time, and awoke benumbed. He felt ill. Then a vague terror of falling ill, of dying on the journey, seized upon him, a fear of being thrown out there, in the middle of that desolate prairie, where his body would be torn in pieces by dogs and birds of prey, like the corpses of horses and cows which he had caught sight of every now and then beside the track, and from which he had turned aside his eyes in disgust. In this state of anxious illness, in the midst of the dark silence of nature, his imagination grew excited, and looked on the dark side of things. Was he quite sure, after all, that he should find his mother at Cordova? And what if she had not gone there? What if that gentleman in the Via del Los Artes had made a mistake? And what if she were dead? Thus meditating, he fell asleep again, and dreamed that he was in Cordova, and it was night, and that he heard cries from all the doors and all the windows, "She is not here! She is not here! She is not here!" This roused him with a start, in terror, and he saw at the other end of the car 3 bearded men enveloped in shawls of various colors who were staring at him and talking together in a low tone, and the suspicion flashed across him that they were assassins, and that they wanted to kill him for the sake of stealing his bag. Fear was added to his consciousness of illness and to the cold. His fancy, already perturbed, became distorted. The 3 men kept on staring at him. One of them moved towards him, then his reason wandered, and rushing towards him with arms wide open, he shrieked, "I have nothing, I am a poor boy, I have come from Italy, I am in quest of my mother, I am alone, do not do me any harm." They instantly understood the situation, they took compassion on him, caressed and soothed him, speaking to him many words which he did not hear nor comprehend, and perceiving that his teeth were chattering with cold, they wrapped one of their shawls around him, and made him sit down again, so that he might go to sleep. And he did fall asleep once more, when the twilight was descending. When they aroused him, he was at Cordova. Ah, what a deep breath he drew, and with what impetuosity he flew from the car. He inquired of one of the station employees where the house of the engineer Mequines was situated. The latter mentioned the name of a church. It stood beside the church. The boy hastened away. It was night. He entered the city, and it seemed to him that he was entering Rosario once more, that he again beheld those straight streets, flanked with little white houses, and intersected by other very long and straight streets. But there were very few people, and under the light of the rare street lanterns, he encountered strange faces of a hue unknown to him, between black and greenish, and raising his head from time to time, he beheld churches of bizarre architecture which were outlined black and vast against the sky. The city was dark and silent, but after having traversed that immense desert, it appeared lively to him. He inquired his way of a priest, speedily found the church and the house, pulled the bell with one trembling hand, and pressed the other on his breast to repress the beating of his heart, which was leaping into his throat. An old woman, with a light in her hand, opened the door. The boy could not speak at once. "Whom do you want?" demanded the dame in Spanish. "The engineer Mequines," replied Marco. The old woman made a motion to cross her arms on her breast, and replied, with a shake of the head, "So you, too, have dealings with the engineer Mequines. It strikes me that it is time to stop this. We have been worried for the last 3 months. It is not enough that the newspapers have said it. We shall have to have it printed on the corner of the street, that Signor Mequines has gone to live at Tucumán. The boy gave way to a gesture of despair. Then he gave way to an outburst of passion. So there is a curse upon me. I am doomed to die on the road, without having found my mother. I shall go mad. I shall kill myself. My God! What is the name of that country? Where is it? At what distance is it situated? Poor boy, replied the old woman, moved to pity. A mere trifle. We are 400 or 500 miles from there, at least. The boy covered his face with his hands, then he asked with a sob, and now what am I to do? What am I to say to you, my poor child? Responded the dame, I don't know. But suddenly an idea struck her, and she added hastily, listen, now that I think of it. There is one thing that you can do. Go down this street, to the right, and at the third house you will find a courtyard. There is a capataz, a trader, who is setting out tomorrow for Tucumán, with his wagons and his oxen. Go and see if he will take you, and offer him your services, perhaps he will give you a place on his wagons. Go at once. The lad grasped his bag, thanked her as he ran, and 2 minutes later found himself in a vast courtyard, lighted by lanterns, where a number of men were engaged in loading sacks of grain on certain enormous carts which resembled the movable houses of mountebanks, with rounded tops and very tall wheels, and a tall man with mustaches, enveloped in a sort of mantle of black and white check, and with big boots, was directing the work. The lad approached this man, and timidly proffered his request, saying that he had come from Italy, and that he was in search of his mother. The capataz, which signifies the head conductor of this convoy of wagons, surveyed him from head to foot with a keen glance, and replied dryly, I have no place. I have 15 lira, answered the boy in a supplicating tone. I will give you my 15 lira. I will work on the journey, I will fetch the water and fodder for the animals, I will perform all sorts of services. A little bread will suffice for me. Make a little place for me, signor? The capataz looked him over again, and replied with a better grace, there is no room, and then, we are not going to Tucumán, we are going to another town, Santiago del Toro. We shall have to leave you at a certain point, and you will still have a long way to go on foot. Ah, I will make twice as long a journey, exclaimed Marco, I can walk, do not worry about that, I shall get there by some means or other, make a little room for me, signor, out of charity, for pity's sake, do not leave me here alone. Beware, it is a journey of 20 days. It matters nothing to me. It is a hard journey. I will endure everything. You will have to travel alone. I fear nothing, if I can only find my mother. Have compassion. The capataz drew his face close to a lantern and scrutinized him. Then he said, very well. The lad kissed his hand. You shall sleep in one of the wagons tonight, added the capataz, as he quitted him. Tomorrow morning, at 4 o'clock, I will wake you. Good night. At 4 o'clock in the morning, by the light of the stars, the long string of wagons was set in motion with a great noise. Each cart was drawn by 6 oxen, and all were followed by a great number of spare animals for a change. The boy, who had been awakened and placed in one of the carts, on the sacks, instantly fell again into a deep sleep. When he awoke, the convoy had halted in a solitary spot, full in the sun, and all the men, the peones, were seated round a quarter of calf, which was roasting in the open air, beside a large fire, which was flickering in the wind. They all ate together, took a nap, and then set out again, and thus the journey continued, regulated like a march of soldiers. Every morning they set out on the road at 5 o'clock, halted at 9, set out again at 5 o'clock in the evening, and halted again at 10. The peones rode on horseback, and stimulated the oxen with long goads. The boy lighted the fire for the roasting, gave the beasts their fodder, polished up the lanterns, and brought water for drinking. The landscape passed before him like an indistinct vision, vast groves of little brown trees, villages consisting of a few scattered houses, with red and battlemented facades, very vast tracts, possibly the ancient beds of great salt lakes, which gleamed white with salt as far as the eye could reach, and on every hand, and always, the prairie, solitude, silence. On very rare occasions they encountered 2 or 3 travelers on horseback, followed by a herd of picked horses, who passed them at a gallop, like a whirlwind. The days were all alike, as at sea, wearisome and interminable, but the weather was fine. But the peones became more and more exacting every day, as though the lad were their bond slave. Some of them treated him brutally, with threats, all forced him to serve them without mercy, they made him carry enormous bundles of forage, they sent him to get water at great distances, and he, broken with fatigue, could not even sleep at night, continually tossed about as he was by the violent jolts of the wagon, and the deafening groaning of the wheels and wooden axles. And in addition to this, the wind having risen, a fine, reddish, greasy dust, which enveloped everything, penetrated the wagon, made its way under the covers, filled his eyes and mouth, robbed him of sight and breath, constantly, oppressively, insupportably. Worn out with toil and lack of sleep, reduced to rags and dirt, reproached and ill-treated from morning till night, the poor boy grew every day more dejected, and would have lost heart entirely if the capataz had not addressed a kind word to him now and then. He often wept, unseen, in a corner of the wagon, with his face against his bag, which no longer contained anything but rags. Every morning he rose weaker and more discouraged, and as he looked out over the country, and beheld always the same boundless and implacable plain, like a terrestrial ocean, he said to himself, "Ah, I shall not hold out until tonight. I shall not hold out until tonight. Today I shall die on the road." And his toil increased, his ill-treatment was redoubled. One morning, in the absence of the capataz, one of the men struck him, because he had delayed in fetching the water. And then they all began to take turns at it, when they gave him an order, dealing him a kick, saying, "Take that, you vagabond. Carry that to your mother."
英語聞き流し10分間、名作リスニング。英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語は、ホームページよりご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com